This month's podcasts are sponsored by Aubergine Legal. Do you sometimes worry that your business isn't meeting all its legal compliance requirements and wonder if you're ticking all the legal boxes? Are you losing sleep worrying about a piece of legislation that you may or may not be complying with? Perhaps you need some help with your client contracts or your data protection compliance. Or maybe you're worried that your website doesn't have the right documents or legal notices in the right place. Perhaps you have a brand that you want to protect with a trademark. How about if you could outsource it all and eliminate all of your worries? If so, then get in touch with Aubergine Legal, a friendly commercial legal consultancy offering practical and clear commercial legal advice without the overwhelming legal jargon, taking the worry away and helping you to protect your business and minimise your risks. Aubergine offers a free 30-minute consultation if you have any questions or want to find out if they can help, and you can access this link and book your free 30-minute call via the link in the show notes. Welcome to the Bring Your Product Idea to Life podcast. This is the podcast for you if you're getting started selling products or if you'd like to create your own product to sell. I'm Vicky Weinberg, a product creation coach and Amazon expert. Every week I share friendly, practical advice as well as inspirational stories from small businesses. Let's get started. So just a few weeks ago in episode 152, we spoke to Chris from Fixits all about the challenges of creating and selling a unique product. What neither Chris or I told you at the time is that Chris had actually already recorded an episode for Dragon's Den, and that episode went out last night, so that's the 9th of March 2023 if you're listening in real time. And I caught up with Chris to find out a little bit more about what it's like to appear on the show, how to prepare, and whether he would recommend it. So whether you've seen last night's episode or not, or if you haven't, I suggest maybe having a watch of it first. It's a great episode. Then sit down and listen to this very short episode of Chris where he explains a lot more about the process. So hi Chris, thank you for talking to me again.
Hey Vicky, good to speak to you.
So we were all very excited to see you on Dragon's Den last night, and as you can imagine, I have some questions if you're happy to share with us.
Yes.
And I would love to start with, when and why did you decide that was something you wanted to do?
And actually, they approached me almost a year ago to ask if I'd like to apply. And I think it would have been crazy not to have at least attempted to get into the den. And I mean, it's not something that I particularly relish, the thought of having to present to 5 people in a very intense scenario. But I couldn't really turn it down. It's too big an opportunity.
Absolutely. And do you know where they found you?
On social media. And it's incredibly long process, I have to say, before you actually get into being filmed on the Den. Many, many steps that took maybe 2 months, I would say, of, submitting, auditioning, sending in documents. It's a very, very long process.
Oh, wow. So you're doing all of that before you even get to sit in front of the dragons?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a case of having to get through a series of steps. It isn't a case of submit your product and your idea and then it's accepted. It is a series of steps. And actually, once it was finally approved, the point at which we filmed was very short. So that critical point of rehearsing and preparing the pitch and what that table looks like with all the products was very short.
Oh wow, that's quite intense, isn't it?
Incredibly intense.
And what kind of things are you asked to prepare? So before you actually, we see you on television in front of the dragons, what sort of things have you been asked to provide and prepare? I'm just thinking for anyone who thinks, oh, I might like to have a go at that. What is it that you need to have?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be very clear on what your product is. And I mean, and it's obvious that there are products that are very topical. And I was very aware of that, and obviously the Fixits is about reducing waste by people repairing their stuff. So one of the first things you do is you submit an online application, which it says, what is your product? And then you have to do, I think, 2 auditions that are online. And at that point, you really hone your story, because it's not very often that you have to pitch your business. And you have, I think, 2 minutes, 3 maximum, if I remember correctly. You can't overstep that. And then once you go through that process, and then that's approved by the producers, then there's a whole series of documents that have to be completed in terms of the business, in terms of sales and figures, and and that has to be approved. And then finally, you get on a train to go to Manchester and have fun, waiting behind the scenes for your turn.
Wow. Well, thank you for explaining all of that. Yeah, it does sound super intense. And do you get any feedback when you're sort of doing your audition? So obviously that's to researchers or producers. Do you get any feedback on what you're pitching or how you're doing it? Or
no,
really?
not from the BBC. They were very supportive throughout the process. I got lots of feedback from people that I knew, friends who had experience, presenting, people who ran theaters. I pitched it to my neighbors, and I realized, I went through 6 different versions of the pitch. Before I even got to writing the pitch, I was prepared to stand there and say, this is my product and this is what it's about, and be very enthusiastic and be very clear, because that's very easy for most people to do. But actually the realization of, you have a very limited amount of time, and you have to tell a very clear story. And I thought, if I were paying for this and I were paying for an actor, I'd give them a script. So therefore I need to have a script. So I really had a script, and I tried to remember that, off by heart, which, was a challenge.
That must be absolutely terrifying, actually. And then obviously they ask you lots of questions as well.
They do. And I think what's very interesting is that when you watch it on TV, you're seeing a very, very small segment of actually the time that you occupy in the den. That I think maybe I was there for an hour and a half, perhaps, which goes very quickly. And you think, I've been in there so long, when you finally leave. And yes, they do ask lots of questions. And obviously the editors, filter out many of those questions. So what you see is not necessarily everything that's discussed. And actually, the dragons themselves have to make a decision, and it really is on the spot. There isn't any prep. There isn't, they're handed information about Fixits beforehand. It really is at that point that you walk through the elevator door, that's when they receive the product. That's when they listen to you. So they have to understand everything. So yeah, it appears like it's a 10-minute Q&A. It's not. It's a very detailed series of questions.
So given that, then I guess you have absolutely no idea what they're going to ask you either, because that was a question I had. I didn't know how much the dragons were briefed on the products and the companies, and so whether they had any questions in mind. But it sounds like no. So you have to be prepared for anything they might ask you.
No. There's no. These are the questions we're going to ask. So I also did a presentation to my accountant, and I said, ask me the number questions, which is the hardest thing, because I think it's not really a realistic scenario that if you're looking for investment, you turn up with having to remember every single number. You have that in front of you, you can refer to, but actually there isn't any of that. You have to remember everything, which was probably the hardest thing, to remember all the numbers, as you witnessed in the show. On a very personal level, I was very happy when we walked out that den, because it's incredibly an incredible build-up. You have to appreciate that you are walking through, what you see is walking through an elevator, is me walking through an elevator, but actually just on the day you are waiting, and that build-up, it's like actors going on stage, or it's like people, waiting to give a speech or, give a lecture. There is that incredible build-up. So on a personal level, I was just relieved. If I tell you any more than that, then that does give away. And I think it's very, it's a great, I think it's a great episode.
It is a great episode. Yeah, I agree. And okay, one final question then that you can answer. Would you recommend it, or would you? And would you, if you had a time machine, would you do it all again?
It's not for the faint-hearted, and it's a lot of work. It really did consume me for weeks beforehand. Really did, in terms of what you have to supply, in advance. I would do it again. I'd love to do it again. I'd love to do it again because I would do such a better job than I would have, because it's the first time I've been in any kind of situation like that. I've given lots of talks and been in lots of presentations, but actually to do it in that scenario was the first time. But I would relish doing it again. And I would advise, if you get the opportunity, absolutely, because it's, obviously there is that PR aspect to it, but I think it really does focus you, because you have to really explain your business and what the benefits are to people who don't know. And through doing that, you do understand much more about your business, because you think, well, actually, why am I doing this? And what have I done? And have I done that research? And, what is my forecast? What is my 6-month, 12-month, 5-year plan? So yes, absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Vicky.
Thank you so much for listening right to the end of this episode. Do remember that you can get the full back catalogue and lots of free resources on my website, vickyweinberg.com. Please do remember to rate and review this episode if you've enjoyed it, and also share it with a friend who you think might find it useful. Thank you again, and see you next week. If you've been inspired to start a podcast in 2024, I really recommend my podcast host, Captivate. Captivate were my top pick when I started podcasting 4 years ago, because of how easy it was for a complete novice like me to get started. I've stuck with them for the last 4 years because Captivate is still really simple to use. They keep adding great new features, like the ability to share ads like these, and they've just been really reliable. So when you're ready to start your own podcast, you can use the link in the show notes and get a free 7-day trial with Captivate.